The cracks in your skepticism are where the nightmares crawl through.
The lights in the warehouse flickered, casting fleeting shadows across the sprawling concrete floor. I stood frozen, the green jumpsuit clinging to my skin, damp from hours of tension. Around me, dozens of other extras shifted uncomfortably in their identical outfits. The set was silent, but it wasn't the kind of silence you wanted. It was heavy, expectant, like the world was holding its breath. And then I saw it. A figure moved among the props. Not a crew member, this one was dressed in the same pink jumpsuit as the guards. But their mask, it wasn't the smooth geometric shape the guards wore. This one was cracked, jagged, and wrong. The figure paused, its head tilting ever so slightly in my direction. "Break's over," someone shouted, their voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. The figure was gone. Let me back up a bit. My name's Danny Kirkland, and I'm an actor. Well, sort of. If standing in the background while the real stars perform counts as acting, then yeah, that's me. I came out to Los Angeles a few years ago, chasing the same dream as everyone else. But between the unpaid gigs and the overpriced rent, I was barely scraping by. When I got the call to be an extra on the set of Squid Game, the final season, I thought my luck had finally turned. Sure, it was just a background role, but it was a Netflix production. A paycheck and maybe, just maybe, a chance to get noticed. The warehouse they rented for the shoot was massive, an industrial relic tucked away on the outskirts of the city. Inside, they'd recreated the games with unsettling precision. The giant playground equipment, the bright yet sterile colors, even the doll from Red Light, Green Light, it was all there. It felt surreal, walking through it all, like stepping into someone else's nightmare. The days were long, and the work was grueling. Standing still for hours while the crew adjusted lights, running through takes of chaotic panic, pretending to be terrified while a fake bullet eliminated someone next to you, it was exhausting. But what really got to me were the guards. They never broke character. Ever. Even during lunch breaks, they stood silently in a corner, their faceless masks turned away from the rest of us. It was supposed to add to the immersion, or so the director claimed, but it was unnerving. Sometimes, I'd catch them watching us, at least, I think they were watching. It was hard to tell with the masks. Most of the other extras were like me, aspiring actors, clinging to the hope that this gig might lead to something bigger. We joked around to pass the time, shared stories of bad auditions, and grumbled about the ridiculous costumes. There was Sarah, a single mom juggling 2 part-time jobs, Mike, a stand-up comedian who hadn't had a gig in months, and Jen, a theater kid who always brought a book to read between takes. We were strangers brought together by desperation and a shared dream. And yet, there was something off about the production. It started small. Props that weren't where they were supposed to be. Whispers echoing through the warehouse when no one was around. A script supervisor who disappeared halfway through the first week and was never replaced. And then there were the guards. One night, after the day's shoot wrapped, I stayed behind to grab my jacket from the set. The warehouse was dark, the kind of dark that eats up the light. I should have felt alone, but I didn't. I could hear them. Their footsteps, soft but deliberate, moving in a rhythm that didn't make sense. Not towards me, but around me, circling like predators testing their prey. When I finally made it to my jacket, I saw something carved into the back wall of the set. No one leaves. The next day, I tried to brush it off as someone's idea of a sick joke. Maybe one of the props guys messing with us. But Sarah wasn't laughing when she told me her keycard to the exit door wasn't working. Or when Jen mentioned seeing someone in a pink jumpsuit lurking outside her motel room. Or when Mike pointed out the weird smell coming from the storage area, metallic and sour, like rust and rot. We started to whisper among ourselves, piecing together the fragments of unease. Something wasn't right. But every time we tried to talk to the crew, we were met with dismissive smiles and vague reassurances. "It's just a show," they said. "You're imagining things." But deep down, we knew. When the cameras stopped rolling and the lights went out, this wasn't just a set anymore. It was a game. And we weren't players. We were pawns. It started with the lights. The warehouse was always dimly lit, with fluorescent tubes that buzzed and flickered, but now they were acting strange. The lights would blink in patterns, almost like Morse code. At first, we joked about it, haunted lights. How original. Mike had laughed, but it didn't feel funny anymore. During one of the breaks, Sarah nudged me and pointed to the ceiling. "Do you see that?" she whispered. I followed her gaze. A single bulb was pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. "That's not normal," she added. She was right. The bulb wasn't flickering like the others, it was deliberate, steady, as if someone, or something, was controlling it. The next day, things escalated. We were shooting a scene for the final game, a dramatic showdown meant to cap off the season. The air was thick with tension as the main actors rehearsed their lines. We, the extras, were positioned around the set, pretending to watch in awe. And then the power cut out. At first, we thought it was a technical glitch. The director shouted for someone to check the breakers, but even in the darkness, I could feel it, that heavy, suffocating silence. And then came the sound. It started as a faint scraping, like nails on a chalkboard, growing louder and closer. It echoed through the cavernous space, setting my teeth on edge. "Who's there?" the director barked, his voice sharp but tinged with fear. No one answered. The lights flickered back on, casting their sickly glow over the set. Everyone was accounted for, except Jen. "Probably went to the bathroom," someone muttered, but the unease was palpable. Jen never left without her book, and it was still sitting on the folding chair where she'd been moments before. The crew tried to move on, but the atmosphere was different now. The joke stopped. The laughter faded. Even the guards seemed to move more stiffly, their heads turning just a little too quickly, their masks catching the light in ways that made your stomach churn. That night, as I left the warehouse, I noticed something strange. The parking lot, usually crowded with cars, was nearly empty. Only 3 vehicles remained, mine, Sarah's, and one of the crew vans. Sarah stood by her car, staring at the van. "Danny," she called, her voice low and shaky, "does that look normal to you?" I walked over, my pulse quickening. The van's back doors were slightly ajar, revealing rows of black masks and pink jumpsuits piled haphazardly inside. But it wasn't just the costumes that made my skin crawl. There were stains. Dark, reddish-brown smears across the fabric. "What the hell?" I whispered, taking a step closer. Before I could investigate further, the van's engine roared to life. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped off, its tires screeching against the pavement. The next morning, Jen still hadn't shown up. The crew claimed she'd quit, but none of us believed it. She hadn't said goodbye, hadn't taken her things. And then there was the message. We found it carved into one of the props, the giant slide from the Sugar Honeycomb game. It was crude, scratched into the plastic as if by a desperate hand. "We're not safe." Mike tried to laugh it off. "Probably some method actor trying to get into character," he said, but his voice wavered. Later that day, during another break, I decided to investigate. I couldn't shake the image of the masks in the van, the eerie precision of the lights, the strange disappearances. Something was wrong, and I needed answers. I wandered into the back of the warehouse, where the props and equipment were stored. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. The air smelled stale, with a faint metallic tang that made me gag. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, but as I turned it on, I saw it, movement in the shadows. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. No response. The shadows shifted again, and I realized it wasn't just one figure. There were 3, maybe 4, all dressed in pink jumpsuits, their masks glinting faintly. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. I'm just looking for something, I stammered, not even sure what I was saying. One of them stepped forward, tilting its head like it was studying me. And then, in a voice distorted by some kind of device, it spoke. Danny Kirkland. You shouldn't be here. How did they know my name? Before I could react, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I spun around to see Sarah, her face pale and eyes wide. We need to go. Now. She dragged me out of the storage area, her grip like iron. When we were back in the main part of the warehouse, she finally let go. What did you see? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. It's not just a show, she said. They're watching us. All of us. That night, I lay awake in my tiny apartment, replaying everything in my mind. The van, the message, the figures in the shadows. Maybe it was all some elaborate prank, a marketing stunt for the show. But then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. Attached was a photo of me, taken earlier that day. I was standing in the storage area, staring into the shadows. But the photo showed something I hadn't seen at the time, one of the masked figures, standing right behind me. The text haunted me for days. Whoever sent it had been there, watching me, close enough to capture the image. My paranoia grew unbearable. Every knock at the door, every unknown number flashing on my phone, felt like a threat. I didn't return to the set immediately. Sarah and I exchanged whispers over the phone, but neither of us dared to speak about the masks, the van, or the figures we'd seen. Instead, we stuck to vague phrases, something's not right. When I finally returned, the atmosphere on set was worse. Extras were quitting without notice, replaced by new faces that seemed even more nervous than we had been. The crew brushed off our concerns with forced smiles, but the director's temper was fraying, his shouts echoing across the warehouse. After another grueling day of filming, I decided to confront one of the guards. They never spoke, never moved unless directed, but they had to be real people under those masks. Right? I cornered one during a break, pretending to check the stitching on my jumpsuit while inching closer. What's going on here? I whispered. Are you guys part of the show, or is this something else? The guard didn't respond. His mask remained fixed on me, the glossy black surface reflecting my own face back at me. Please, I said, my voice cracking. I saw the van. The message. You know something. The guard tilted his head, almost imperceptibly, then leaned in closer. His voice, when he finally spoke, was muffled and distorted but chillingly clear. They're always watching. Even now. Before I could press further, the lights dimmed, signaling the end of the break. The guard straightened and marched back to his post, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, Sarah called me in a panic. They're here, she whispered. Outside my apartment. Danny, I can see them. My stomach dropped. Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm coming over. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, the cold night air biting at my skin. Sarah's apartment was only a few blocks away, but every shadow seemed to stretch and twist as I ran. When I reached her building, the front door was ajar. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, the fluorescent hallway lights flickering above me. Sarah? I called, my voice echoing down the corridor. No response. Her door was at the end of the hall. It was wide open, the lock splintered as if forced. I stepped inside, the scent of copper and decay hitting me like a wall. Sarah. The apartment was trashed. Furniture overturned, papers scattered, and in the center of the living room was her phone, the screen cracked, a faint glow illuminating the words on the screen. Game over. A sound behind me made me spin around. The door slammed shut, and there they were, 3 figures in pink jumpsuits, their masks glinting in the dim light. "What do you want?" I shouted, backing away. They didn't answer. Instead, they moved in unison, spreading out to block every possible exit. I grabbed a lamp from the floor, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back." The figures paused, as if considering my threat, then one of them reached up and slowly removed their mask. What I saw wasn't a face. It was wrong. The skin was pale and stretched too tightly over a skull that didn't seem human. The eyes were hollow, empty pits, and the mouth, God, the mouth, was filled with jagged, mismatched teeth that twitched and gnashed. The thing tilted its head, studying me like a predator sizing up its prey. "This isn't a game," it rasped. The others removed their masks, revealing similarly twisted visages. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat as they advanced. I swung the lamp wildly, the crash of breaking glass doing nothing to deter them. I backed into the kitchen, my hands fumbling for anything I could use to defend myself. My fingers closed around a knife. "Stay away!" I screamed, slashing the air in front of me. They hesitated, their heads cocking in unison, as if they were communicating silently. Then, without warning, they lunged. I barely had time to react, swinging the knife wildly as they closed in. The blade sliced into one of them, but instead of blood, a thick black ooze seeped from the wound. It smelled acrid, like burning rubber, and the creature didn't even flinch. I was overwhelmed, their clawed hands grabbing at me, pulling me to the ground. My screams were muffled as one of them leaned in close, its rancid breath washing over me. And then, everything went dark. I woke up in the warehouse, lying on the cold concrete floor. My jumpsuit was damp with sweat, or was it blood? My vision blurred as I tried to sit up, the pounding in my head making it difficult to focus. Around me, the set was eerily quiet. The props were gone, the cameras dismantled. It was as if the show had never existed. I staggered to my feet, my mind racing. Was it a dream? A hallucination? But then I saw it. Carved into the wall, deep and jagged, were the same words I'd seen before. "No one leaves." My phone buzzed in my pocket. With trembling hands, I pulled it out. A new message. "Welcome to the next level." Attached was a photo. It was me, lying on the warehouse floor, surrounded by the figures in pink jumpsuits. They weren't wearing their masks. And their hollow eyes were staring directly at the camera. I didn't leave the warehouse that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. Every door was locked, every window reinforced. It was like the entire building had shifted while I was unconscious, trapping me inside a maze that bore only a passing resemblance to the set I had worked on. The air was heavy, suffused with a faint hum that set my teeth on edge. My phone buzzed again. "Follow the lights." I didn't want to obey, but what choice did I have? The lights, those flickering fluorescent tubes, formed a path through the darkness. One after another, they buzzed to life, guiding me deeper into the labyrinth of corridors and empty sets. The message carved into the wall haunted me, "No one leaves." I turned a corner and found myself in a room I didn't recognize. It wasn't part of the set. The walls were bare concrete, the floor slick with a viscous black liquid that reeked of decay. In the center of the room stood a monitor, its screen alive with static. I hesitated, but the static shifted, forming an image that froze me in place. It was a live feed of me. The screen showed me standing in the same room, holding my phone, staring at the monitor. But there was something else in the frame, something behind me. I spun around, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was empty. The monitor buzzed, and a distorted voice crackled through unseen speakers. "You think this is about survival? The image on the screen shifted, showing the warehouse as it had been during the shoot. Extras, myself included, stood in their green jumpsuits, following the director's instructions. The scene seemed ordinary, until I noticed the guards. They weren't following the script. In the footage, they moved differently, their heads snapping toward the extras with unnatural speed. One by one, the extras started to glitch, flickering like static on a broken television. And then they disappeared, leaving behind only faint shadows on the ground. The voice spoke again. "You are the game." It hit me like a sledgehammer. The guards, the disappearances, the strange behavior, it wasn't part of some elaborate production or twisted prank. It was real. We weren't just actors playing roles. We were the entertainment. The monitor switched to another feed, this one showing rows of people sitting in a darkened auditorium, their faces illuminated by glowing screens. They were watching us. Watching me. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. "No," I whispered. "This can't be real." The voice laughed, a guttural, inhuman sound. "Your choices are meaningless. Your fear, your struggle, it's all for them. And they want more." The lights in the room dimmed, plunging me into near darkness. A faint buzzing filled the air, growing louder until it felt like my skull would split. And then I saw them. The guards. No, not guards, something else entirely. Their masks were gone, revealing faces that defied logic. Their features shifted and twisted like oil on water, never settling into anything recognizable. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, fixed on me. "You can't do this," I shouted, backing away until my heels hit the wall. One of them stepped forward, tilting its head as if amused. "You signed the contract." My mind reeled. The contract. The one I had skimmed over, eager to land the gig. Pages of legalese I hadn't bothered to read. What had I agreed to? The creature raised a hand, and the air around me seemed to ripple. The black liquid on the floor rose in thin tendrils, wrapping around my ankles and pulling me forward. "No! Stop!" I screamed, clawing at the ground. But there was no escape. The creature surrounded me, their distorted faces mere inches from mine. And then, one by one, they began to speak, not with words, but with voices pulled from my memories. "Remember when you said you'd do anything to make it big? You didn't read the fine print, Danny. This is what they paid to see." Their voices overlapped, a cacophony of accusations and mockery. I couldn't tell where my thoughts ended and theirs began. The walls of the room shifted, melting away to reveal an audience. Rows upon rows of faceless figures sat in shadow, their eyes glowing faintly as they stared down at me. The creatures stepped aside, leaving me alone in the spotlight. The voice returned, booming now, reverberating through my entire body. "Dance for them, Danny. Show them what they came for." I collapsed to my knees, tears streaming down my face. The audience erupted in applause, their faceless heads tilting back in silent laughter. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the room went dark. When the lights came back on, I was back in the warehouse. The set was pristine, the crew bustling about as if nothing had happened. "Danny! You're up," the director called, waving me over. I stumbled forward, my mind reeling. What day is it?" The director laughed. "You've been out for a bit, buddy. But don't worry, the cameras missed you." Cameras. The word sent a chill down my spine. I glanced around at the other extras. Their faces were blank, their eyes glassy. And then I saw it, etched faintly into the concrete floor beneath my feet. "You are still playing." The director clapped his hands. "All right, places, everyone. Let's roll." And the lights came on, brighter than ever before.